Welcome to the Strap and Link podcast, where we cover brands from their inception to their latest release.
It's the Montress Tudor.
Like I said, better movement, spring drive
So,
potentially, Rolex Oyster Perpetual.
There's Super Ocean here. Now you see this kind of renaissance of Tudor. Finally, in 2016, they achieved the spring drive with an 8-day power. The podcast for watch lovers by watch lovers. New episodes every first and third Monday of the month.
Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the Strap and Link podcast with your host Brett, joined as always with my good friend David and your co-host. And yeah, we're a week late, so want to jump out real quick, just say sorry for that. We had a bunch of travel in February and March, and yeah, we just kind of got backed up, so we had to
this
delay
whole
it.
spring's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot for us, but just bear with us if things come a day or so late. If this happens again, we don't want it to be this way, but I know our May is going to be just as busy, so we're going to try to get a little bit ahead and be a little more studious on this, and maybe record, be on top of things.
Studious.
But,
I like that word.
We'll see how we make promises, but we'll see if we can follow through with it.
I like that. Well, yeah, speaking about that, today we have a really cool episode. We have kind of a new episode format today, so I'll let David jump into that in just 1 second. But we will, kind of to David's point, we'll be doing some maybe different things, not so much on the timing, but more episodes like this. So definitely let us know if you all like today's episode. You can do that by DMing us or emailing. There's a million ways to get in touch with us. But if you are a regular and you've been with us for some time, we have some similarities to today's episode, but the sort of core, focus or the core topic that we're going to be looking at today, that is going to be a little bit different from what we do traditionally. So David, like I said, I'll let him break that down, and then we'll get into what we're going to talk about today specifically, and we'll go ahead and kick the episode off.
Yeah. Today, I think we hinted at this a little bit at the end of our last episode, but we're going to really discuss the Rolex GMT-Master collection and some of the most iconic models and our favorite references over the years. I know Brett's kind of diving a little bit in some of the older models, and we're going to go all the way up to the release of last year's model. So there's a bunch to really jump into here, and if you're a fan of the old GMTs, this will be something for you. And if you're more like me and really are just more familiar with the newer ones, then this is be perfect for you as well. So and give you a little bit of history, so maybe you'll sound like you know what you're talking about when you talk to your friends about some GMTs and some Rolexes. But today we're going to look at the following GMT Masters from Rolex. The first one will be the Pan Am Pepsi. We have reference numbers, but there's honestly a few reference numbers I know from mine. So I'll just kind of give you the nicknames, and most people will know these by their nicknames. But the Pepsi, and then we're also going to discuss the Coke, which I know has a very cult following, is one of my favorite watches. I still hate to this day that they discontinued it. And the Batman, which, funny enough, yesterday I actually saw a guy at a convention wearing a Batman, or actually it was a Batgirl with the Jubilee, and it was just stunning watch. Again, you don't see many of them out in the wild, and same thing with the Pepsis. There's a ton out there, but for me at least, I don't really see too many of them in person, and so to see one of those was really cool and special, and I thought it was really fitting for recording this episode the next day. And then last but not least, we are going to talk about the new GMT, which came out in 2023. I know some people have nicknamed it the Guinness, but it was the 2023 model, so there's a two-tone and a 18 karat gold version of that, so we'll kind of discuss both of them in one.
Yeah, for sure. And one point of clarification before we jump in today, the models, I think for quick distinguishment, the Pepsi and the Batman. So we're going to be talking about not the current offerings for those, but we're going to be talking about the sort of like initial release references for those. So for the Pepsi, that would be just the Rolex GMT-Master. That was the original release with the 6542. And then the Batman, we will be looking at the 11-6710, the BLNR, that released in 2013. So again, not the current day offerings. We'll talk, maybe a little bit about
both of them.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of maybe compare and contrast, but we do want to, like David said, bring a little bit of a historical aspect. So given that, like I said, we'll talk about those original releases and and some other cool stuff that I'm excited to get into here in a minute because I added something very last minute. It's only going to be a very quick section, but I think it'll be really cool for listeners. Before we jump into that, though, like I said earlier, if you want to follow us and interact, hit us up on DM or something like that. Feel free to
Mhm.
follow us on Instagram at Strap and Link. We've also got YouTube and things like that. So there are some different ways to sort of
Yep.
consume episodes from us. But yeah, really, our Instagram has become more of kind of a place for us to converse and,
Yeah.
talk and share, other content creators, content. And like I said, just to converse and DM with people. So we do reels occasionally of, our watches and some episode stuff. But again, if you like the show or if this is your first time and you just want to get to know us a little bit, say what's up, feel free to follow us over there. And David runs our TikTok,
Yeah.
so he's got
So
some stuff
also,
over there too.
yeah, follow us on TikTok. Again, Instagram and TikTok are our most active social media sites at the moment.
Hmm.
But both TikTok's really been gaining a momentum, obviously, as I think every
Yeah.
creator is noticing. But our TikTok definitely gets a good outreach. So we've been getting more and more DMs on there. So definitely follow us on both. And there are definitely some similar posts, and a lot of the times we'll post the same thing. But I know TikTok, for example, I'll go in there personally and find some old deep cuts of wrist rolls or different places I've been with watches, and post them on there that maybe won't make the Instagram cut. So a
Yeah.
little bit different experience.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. Well, let's go ahead and move into the topic of the hour. So I was thinking earlier today while I was doing some of my research that I don't know, kind of wanting to see what like the GMT watch landscape looked like both before and then after the original Rolex GMT Master came out.
Hmm.
So again, wanting to kind of get that before and after picture and just kind of see if there was any trend setting that happened or anything like that. Basically, what I wanted to know was, did Rolex start this trend or did they elevate it? And
Hmm.
as most of these stories go that involve Rolex, they were the trendsetter. And so before the GMT Master, some of the popular traveler watches, I'm going to say traveler because these are pilots' watches, GMTs. So they sort of encompass a variety of complications and use cases, but all for a traveling person. Was the Glycine Airman? This was introduced in 1953. Was one of the first watches that featured a 24-hour dial and a rotating bezel that tracked the second time zone. The
Hmm.
Rolex Zerograph, which was produced in the 30s and the 40s, this was a precursor, apparently, to the GMT Master, or is how this was relayed over to me. And the research that I found was that it was a precursor that featured a rotating bezel used to measure elapsed time. So basically, a countdown. Very similar to a dive bezel. Honestly, I mean, it's effectively count up, count down. So, um, yeah, so there was a Rolex model that was there. There was also the Longines Lindbergh Hour Angle watch. So they created that in partnership with Charles Lindbergh in the 1930s. We covered a little bit of the relationship there in our Longines episode. So if you haven't listened to the very first Longines episode, go back and check out that history portion.
Yeah.
But this Lindbergh Hour Angle watch featured a rotating bezel, allowed pilots to calculate their longitudinal, their longitude during long flights. So not a traditional GMT, but it was, of course, very influential
Yeah.
um, over the course of history and watchmakers involving tools with aviation. And then lastly, one of the more interesting models and especially brands that came up was the Vacheron Constantin reference 4414. So this was introduced in the 40s and featured a world time function as well as a rotating bezel with cities that represented different time zones. So kind of set the stage for what the landscape for travel watches looked like back in the day. And so now let's go ahead and jump into our first Rolex GMT Master, which is the 6442 reference. This was the 6542 reference.
Gotta get that one number right.
I know. Let me, I'll run that again. So the first watch of the day that we're going to look at, the first GMT Master is the GMT Master 6542. This is the original that was produced in conjunction with Pan American Airways during what some people do refer to as the heyday of air travel.
The
And
golden
so,
age. Yep.
yeah, exactly. The golden age of flying. You could smoke your cigarettes. You know, you had your baby right there. You know, just everyone's up partying, walking around,
Yeah.
drinking cocktails, and so yeah, Rolex and Pan American Airways partner together to create this watch that, of course, makes it possible to tell the time in two different time zones at
Hmm.
once. So, with long haul travel becoming more and more common, this was something that pilots specifically actually needed. And so, this first GMT Master was born and it was released in 1954. This featured a red and a blue bicolor bezel or two tone bezel that, of course, now we are all extremely familiar with. But the original purpose was to aid in differentiating between daytime hours, which would be in red, and then the nighttime hours, which would be in blue. This certain, I guess, the certain reasoning for the two colors and the sort of night and the day hours, because again, day is supposedly being red and then nighttime being blue.
Hmm.
I think now it's probably used more as a decorative thing for watchmakers and watch
Hmm.
brands because you don't always see the daytime hours being in the lighter color. Sometimes
Hmm.
there's equally dark colors or
Yeah.
equally light colors. Sometimes you see like a yellow and a white or something like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. These are the
it's
original thought.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was the original thought, and some watches obviously do that. But I like the purpose of it. I like that
Yeah,
that
I
it's
like that too. Like you were saying, I like having, hey, this is the reason it's that way versus like you
hmm
were saying, yellow and green. Like what the heck? That doesn't make much of a difference. It doesn't make much sense. I like the idea of having the red and black or the blue and black, and the
yeah.
Batman I think signifies it probably the best with the blue and then the black above it. But
Yeah, the Batman, I like the how that pulls it off the best too, and
mhm.
yeah, but I think it's another one of those things that from Rolex specifically of
Yeah.
trend set through and through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's very cool, and a lot of people I know even when I was before we really got into the podcast, I knew of the two tones, but I didn't know the significance, and I know a lot of people that
yeah.
don't, and that's all the colors. There's always a light and a darker color, whether that's the Batman blue and black or the new GMT that we're going to talk about with the gray and black. There's always two different tones, and one signifies daytime and one nighttime.
So yeah, I mean, at the time though, that color choice or just really just the choice in general to color a bezel, let alone to color it in two,
Yeah.
kind of fun and bright colors at least again for standards at the time, it was a pretty bold take. So remember in the 50s, there's a lot of dress watches. Dive watches are literally just emerging or submerging onto the market, and so those are not really going to be colorful either. They're going to be black dials and David's cracking up. It's submerged.
The watch puns.
You like
Oh
that?
man,
That
yeah,
was,
that
that
was
was
pretty good.
smooth.
That was good.
He's a smooth
Yeah, we wouldn't have been
operator.
able to do that a year ago.
Smooth operator.
Oh
All right, I
man, we
like
would
that.
not have had that off the top of our head a year ago. Yeah.
So the kind of a fairly wild, colorful take that Rolex took there. To wrap up the little bit of history here, this is the first GMT that ever included a two-tone bezel design like this. So I did my research here. I wanted to kind of fact check this and see again what were the offerings before Rolex released the GMT Master. We found that there's a list. It's a short list, but there is a list.
Mhm.
There were not a lot of GMTs. There were none that were doing this two-tone. There was no one that thought of let's do two-tone, and let alone one's going to be nighttime and one's going to be daytime hours. So I mean, there was a lot about this watch that, I mean, to this day, this is still a watch that's offered in the modern catalog. This configuration with the Jubilee in the red and the
Mhm.
black, or I'm sorry, in the red and the blue two
Yeah.
tone bezel. So that was the reason for me picking it. And one last little, let's call this an anecdote. Supposedly, the colors red and blue were chosen not due to Rolex or to Pan American. The Pan American logos were actually red and white. There were some bag tags that were red and blue, but what some people say or speculate is that the colors were potentially chosen because reading the dial and the bezel would be easier with those specific colors
Mhm.
under a red cockpit light. So I guess pilots back then cockpits were illuminated red to help with nighttime, just night vision, keeping
Yeah.
things light on the old eyeballs. So
Yeah.
speculative, but who knows?
I always when I started paying attention more to Rolex, I always leaned towards this watch more. If I had to pick a GMT, it probably would have been the Pepsi of some variation. Just the red and blue. from day one really caught my attention. And I mean, it's the Pepsi and the Coke, which we will step into next. These are just two just iconic. I mean, they match. They give the vibe. You know, some people talk the Batman, the blue and black. You know that I understand where it's coming from, but just having the red and blue, nothing pops like that. Like you said, it just reminds you of summertime, the 4th of July. You know,
Mm,
and it does. I mean, this is the great. You can dress it up, dress it down. GMT watch right here, and I mean, obviously, there's a reason why it's been emulated for the last
yeah,
75 years.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean, I was thinking about that too. I'm going to run down some very quick specs because there's only a
mhm.
few things that you can really pull out with some of the older watches
Yeah.
like this. So released again, like I said, in 1954. This was the reference 6542. Stainless steel. It was 38 millimeters in diameter at the time. It was 50 meters water resistant. And there were three different calibers that went into that particular reference there, being the 1036, the 1065, and the Rolex 1066. So varying degrees potentially of beats per hour and power reserve. I did not
Hmm.
go that deep into the archives.
Yeah.
A few bits of what I thought significant were that this watch, being in the 50s, had acrylic crystal. So, if you guys have ever wondered, like, why does the Omega Speedmaster have a hesilite and a
Mhm.
sapphire when sapphire is obviously what everyone wants these days? It's just paying homage to materials like this that they used to
Yeah.
use excuse me, that they used to use back in the day. So acrylic on this one. And also, I read this really, really interesting bit here that said the 24-hour and the local hand were actually linked together. So the bezel actually had to be turned to tell the second time zone.
Huh.
So I don't know if what I read, if I just misunderstood that or if they mistyped and misprinted it or whatever, but it sounds like, so a current or a modern day GMT movement, right, has a jumping hour hand, either the local
Mhm.
or the traveling. It doesn't really matter. You can jump one of those generally,
Yeah.
but there's another, when you're not in that setting to jump it independently, the local and the 24-hour hand, they move together, right? So there's no way to separate the readings of the two, but I guess it sounds like back in the day that was how the calibers worked then too. So they didn't have any jumping hour hands. Maybe to like a real, horology nerd, this is all obvious, but to me, it kind of jumped out. I was like, wow, that sounds really inconvenient. That you couldn't just like land wherever you're traveling and jump the hour hand forward or backwards. You also, I would assume, could not quick set the date because of that. You had to do full rotations, or maybe there was just a date wheel. But anyway,
Mhm.
read that, thought that it was interesting, a little bit on the nerdier side of the history, but wanted to include that nonetheless. So that kind of wraps up my perspective of the Pepsi. I chose it, obviously, like we said. The staying power, I mean, it's still offered to this day. It's the most, I think, probably the most iconic
Yeah.
Rolex watch ever made. I mean, the Submariner is obviously very far up there, but there's a lot of variations of subs that have been popular and then discontinued, and then new ones come out. But
Yeah.
this is like, again, they still make the same exact watch in today's world. So
Mhm.
the staying power to me just makes it really, really awesome. I think it's
Yeah, it
why it's
stands out.
also such an investable piece too.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
this
it's
is a
also
$10,000 watch at retail, and what you
yeah.
people pay 20, 25 grand,
Yeah.
in good markets for it. So um, yeah, the investable aspect of it's there too for anyone interested in that bit of
Mhm.
Rolex.
Yeah, I think also I mean, just again looking at the time period, 1954 coming out with a 38 millimeter watch. That's a big
That's yeah.
diameter for that time period. I mean, that is by far the 31 to maximum 34 millimeter time
Hmm.
period. And so coming out, I mean, I think it was bold. Of course, now we can just jump on over to the Coke, which was introduced in 1982, 1983. A few conflicting reports. I wasn't around during the time, so somewhere in that time period. But it was the successor of the original GMT Master, which made, of course, its debut in 1954, like Brett was just saying. The nickname, the Coke, obviously just like the Pepsi, it's iconic for its colors and what it stands out for, but it also, of course, has a very distinctive purpose. I could go through the history, but it's going to be the same thing that we talked about with the Pepsi. It's just a different variation of this. And now you'll see, obviously, you're still sticking around with the Pepsi, like Brett was saying. The Submariner changed completely from time to time, but the GMT stuck with their original and then started doing slight variations out, which now you'll see with the Submariner today. But during the time, this was the time of just changing. In the 1980s, every watch company was really coming alive, and there were a lot of changes with Rolex and other big brands just alike. But again, this watch, what I was saying before, it jumped up from a 38 to a 40. So again, in the 1980s, the diameters really jumped from around 34, but I mean, 34, 36 was still as big as you would go. So jumping from a 38 to a 40, I feel like this, the Rolex always had a bigger dial on this and really made it stand out. So I wonder at the time, how popular was this watch for the everyday wearer? I feel like this was, you really wore this watch as a occupation piece, for
Mm,
whether that's flying or not. This wouldn't be the everyday wearing around watch that you would think of, because I mean, you can talk to maybe some of our older listeners, or even some of our listeners, parents, grandparents, when they talk about, there was no way in heck they were wearing a 38 millimeter watch. Was big at their, when they were coming up, and so a 40 even at that time was just ginormous. So I think it
yeah.
is, I'm looking back today, obviously the GMT is stuck with that 40 millimeter size, and I think it is a great size for what today's market is. But because I mean, that would be like them jumping up to a 44 in today's world. It's just a complete.
Yeah.
I think it's something to look back on and really understand that this was a tool piece. This wasn't something to toy around. That really didn't start happening until probably the mid 2000s, where they became collectible pieces that anybody would wear at any time just because of the color variation.
Yeah. It's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, again, like David said, we were definitely not around in the 80s and the 90s, so it's hard for us to tell, but I would be, I mean, interested to kind of just know what the watch world was like at that point in time. I mean, obviously you didn't have social media, so when these new pieces came out, you probably just saw them in like catalogs and things like that,
Hmm.
probably like in shopping malls too. You could see catalogs and maybe like place an order for a watch or something. So yeah, I mean, maybe to your point, I mean, without the kind of sex appeal behind what is like social media today, you
Yeah.
can't make these really fun like reels and stuff like that, and these interactive, bits of, again, just marketing material.
Marketing, yeah,
So
that's what
back
it
then,
is. Yeah.
people probably looked at it and like, wow, it's a Rolex. Like it's pretty binary. I would imagine I can or I
Hmm.
cannot afford it.
And
And the
I
people
would,
that could afford it probably were looking. I mean, the '80s, like
yeah,
gold watches. Like, give me
yeah.
a sub, maybe. So yeah, interesting to see if this was like today's market where people buy Pepsis and they buy Batmans and Batgirls just because it's a GMT Master, and
Yeah.
people just
I
want
mean,
that watch. Like it's a
this
status
was
symbol today.
also yeah, this was also during the heat of the Pepsi Coke wars, I mean, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s. You really had a size. You drank Coke or you drink Pepsi. So, I mean, this is a
I
way
didn't
to
even
make
think
your
about
stand.
that. Yeah.
And I mean, it is, and I'm personally, I think this is a much more masculine watch. I mean, I know I said
Oh yeah.
before that I love the blue and
Yeah.
black of the Batman, but I for some reason just completely blanked. This is my favorite variation of day versus nighttime. The red for the daytime and the
Mm.
black. I mean, this is just a masculine out there watch that I think really stands on its own, and it's really just hard to beat. And this is probably a watch that somebody in my family will end up owning at some point, whether that's me or my
Or
brother.
I was gonna say, or
Yeah,
you?
this is my family company's even company color. So, that's always been our excuse. We're red and black. And so you got to have a Coke at some point just to, wear it to work. It would match
Hmm.
perfectly with whatever you're wearing. So, this I think definitely will be at some point in my collection. The only, like I said, downfall even today is just it discontinued fairly, in the early 2000s, 2007, 2008. So I wish that there were more modern variations out
Do
there
you
on the
think it's
market
gonna
to
come
get.
out? Do you think
I
it's gonna
don't.
come out this year?
And it could. I know there's a lot of rumors that this year, of course, that would be our luck,
Yeah.
is to have this whole episode and then tomorrow it gets released.
I
But
know.
and if it does, we will bring it up on our next episode.
We'll probably still do like a watches and wonders, like a
Yeah.
first reaction. We'll probably still do something like that. But I mean, there's a lot of hype
It
around it,
needs to
and
get brought back in some sort of variation. And I mean,
yeah.
change it up. Make it, I was saying I love the Pepsi with a Jubilee die or bracelet. And maybe it's and same thing with the Batman. I love them both with the Jubilee. I don't want to say it's more of a feminine look, but it just isn't as harsh and brass with the colors. So I think the Jubilee bracelet really matches that vibe better of a Pepsi. Where this is one of the few watches where I think I would really prefer the Oyster bracelet on being the Coke.
Well, in
You know,
this one too, the oyster being all brushed,
yeah,
I think that plays because
it
like
just
because you're
yeah,
wearing your Yachtmaster right now, which has
hmm
the polished center links, and then if we scroll down to the Batman, that has polished center links.
yeah,
So I think it's I don't know if it's the polished center links or the bezel of the blue color in the Batman's case,
yeah,
or if it's the combination. But I
yeah.
definitely get that sense. Like when you get an all brushed watch, it takes on a very tool like feel. Like it's a
Feel
real
yeah.
true tool watch. Like your sub 16610
hmm
probably has a much more tooly
Oh yeah.
look and feel than your
Then this
Yachtmaster
Yachtmaster.
Rhodium does.
Yeah.
Because, for lack of a better phrase, like that Yachtmaster, ain't no damn way I'm looking at that thing like a tool watch. Like it looks a
No,
lot more
exactly.
dressy,
Yeah.
and
It
it's interesting how watches can do that.
and
But
this is really the first time, so if we're just rambling here, I'm really trying to work it out in my head because this is the first time I've really thought about this, and that's the best way I can portray how I feel about the Pepsi versus the Coke. I love them both, and I'd love either one of them, and, obviously, if you had both of them sitting in front of me, for just pure, just all around reasons, I would probably pick the Pepsi. But just when it comes to the color variation, I love the red and black more. But it's crazy the tearing between the two of what my
yeah,
favorite watch would be, which is how it's supposed to be.
yeah, I mean it is.
Supposed to be hard.
I am more of a blue fan, so I
Yeah.
think that's a good segue. Unless you have
No,
anything
we're
left here on the Coke, you want to go on to the
yeah. Let's move on to the Batman.
Marvel.
We can talk
What is
about
it?
them all.
What is it? Marvel or DC?
DC.
DC. Okay. Sorry, comic fan.
Nah,
Sorry,
I'm sorry, guys. I keep them in line.
we just
Try
lost
to.
followers. Sorry. So let's kind of
When
go
is
ahead.
the
We're gonna
Iron Man coming out? Now that would be a heck of a watch to
wait.
release
What
this
is the
year.
Iron Man?
I said
Red and
there
yellow.
should be, yeah, some red and yellow maybe,
Oh, wait. Hold on.
or you could
If you
do a
did
red and
gold,
gray
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
bezel.
If you put it on a gold watch, you could do like rose gold or yellow gold. No. You can't do yellow and red, even rose and red.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know.
you could do the gray that's on the Guinness now with a
A
red,
red.
and that would be the Iron Man.
Mm.
With
Or if you
some
two
sort of
tone it,
ivory, yeah,
if you
with some
two tone
with the
gold and
yellow. Oh,
silver,
yeah,
there you go. And then the red. Look at
yeah.
that. Look at boom, Rolex. Hey, hit us up. Hit us up. Well, before the Iron Man came out, there was the Batman. The Batman reference here, the 116710. This is the BLNR. So the GMT Master 2 BLNR, nicknamed Batman, was released in 2013. The most distinctive feature here of this one, obviously, is going to be the blue and the black ceramic bezel. It was the first Rolex of a GMT type that included a blue and a ceramic bezel. So, fun fact, we're going to get into all the little differences there. But again, this bezel crafted from a single piece of ceramic, very eye catching. Aside from like the durability aspect of it, I have a ceramic bezel in my collection, and then I've got some alumina, or not aluminum. I'm sorry, but I've got some. Or yeah, I guess yeah, that's what the inserts are on the black bait, right? They're aluminum.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, by the way, this hate to cut you off, but the Coke bezels were aluminum, by the way.
Yeah. So the Batman 116710, like you just said, or like we were saying, that actually was the first GMT that did not have a metal bezel insert. This one being a single piece of ceramic. So again, durable, but also just it doesn't fade like the aluminum ones do. I know that's something of a collector item in the Rolex community, or maybe kind of subculture these days,
Yeah,
but it doesn't fade. So you're not going to find the very light pale blue and red,
yeah.
or in this
The
case,
gun, yeah,
black.
shotgun metal, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, you're not going to find that old, faded,
gun metal, yeah,
Pepsi can, like a literal can, fades like that in the sun. But it also makes it look a lot more dressy. And so we're going to get into that. I think it's interesting. I don't know if it was intentional what Rolex did with all of these little updates, but we've already kind of hinted at it with the Coke discussion there. So a little bit of foreshadowing. So this watch featured a 40 millimeter stainless steel case, black dial with chromolite, luminescent hands, and hour markers. Of course, had the GMT Master 2's signature arrow tipped 24-hour hand as well. This one was powered by the Rolex 3186 caliber and offered, of course, the second time zone. These calibers now, today, presently, do offer that independent jumping hour hand. So unlike the Pepsi that we were
Hmm.
talking about. So again, this watch released in 2013 at Baselworld. Really, to David's point, like we kind of mentioned earlier, took the world a little bit by storm from Rolex standards. I mean, it was the first
Yeah.
GMT from them that included blue. As we've talked about, not a lot of GMTs that play in this category. I mean, today in 2024, yes, there are, rewind 10, 15, 12 years ago, definitely not so much. So to see the big brand branching off like that was pretty much a big deal.
Hmm.
But stainless, like we said, 40 millimeter, 12 millimeter on the case thickness, so nothing really changing there. 100 meters of water resistance, so we've stepped up from the older models. And again, the 3186 Rolex caliber within, beating it 4 hertz with a power reserve of 50 hours.
Yeah.
And another cool bit, I wanted to research this. I like to do this when you can find it. Watch is 10, 20 years old. Sometimes you can find it. This Rolex, the Batman, originally at retail in 2013 cost $8,950. So for comparison today, that watch is what, 11,500
Yeah.
or like 11,800 or something like
Yeah.
that. So I mean, hey, I kind of look at that. I'm like, 11 years and it's only increased like 3 grand. I mean, I don't know. Is that good or bad? It seems slow to me, but I don't know.
Well, it all slowly probably crept up until the last 4 years, and now it's
Nah,
everything's
yeah,
blowing up now. It
yeah,
probably was.
that's
I
true.
wish we could look back at 2019 what it sold for, which I'm sure
I
somebody might
know.
know if they bought it back then. But yeah.
My buddy has a Pepsi, like a modern Pepsi, and we
Hmm.
were, kind of, I was like talking about this episode we were doing, and I didn't mean for this to come out like he like paid a lot for his Pepsi aftermarket, but just everyone pays a lot for their Pepsi aftermarket because doing this research, like
Yeah.
I recall how relatively inexpensive the GMTs are compared to the aftermarket costs. I mean,
Hmm.
it
And
just
that really
because I
did.
never see them and you never have to pay attention at retail because you know that
Yeah.
you're never going to get one. Like everyone and their mother wants one. They're the hardest ones to get. So
Yeah.
no, I feel like it's forgotten fact almost that those watches they cost the same as the date just that you see on
Yeah.
everyone's arm. I
Yeah.
mean, they cost a little bit more than, the Explorer 2s do.
Yeah.
But aftermarket, it's like, damn, man, they're so investable. These GMTs are
Yeah.
so investable.
And that really happened over the last, like we said, 4 years or
Mhm.
so since COVID.
Mhm.
I know a coworker of mine. He has one. He had the one with the Jubilee bracelet, Pepsi with the Jubilee bracelet. Couldn't sell it back in like 2015, 16. Because he wanted a certain price for it, pretty much what he paid for it, and could not get rid of it. Finally sold it and traded it in for another couple watches. And then he went back and of course look at what's all happened, and he's like,
Yeah.
son of a, he's like, if I just would have kept it, I would have doubled what I got for it, and I would have doubled it in the next day. I would have been able to sell it in a day.
Yeah.
And again, that's just the way of the game. But over the last 4 years, the inflation of these watches have, really skyrocketed. And obviously in the last year or so, it's gone back down from where it was at its peak in 21 and 22, but it's still, it's still there.
And if the crazy rumors are true, if for whatever reason they can't keep making the Pepsi, oh
That
my
with that red.
god,
Yeah.
they're gonna get so expensive.
Yeah.
But really quick, let me wrap up some quick little details. And I said there were some really interesting things about the Batman, so let's hit those real quick. So we talked about the ceramic bezel. It's the first two-tone ceramic bezel by Rolex. There were previously ceramic bezels that were monotone. So on the Submariners, right, we're talking like all blue. I don't know if they ever did an all. I don't think they ever did an all red, but you've got green, you've got blue, black. So there were
Yeah.
some ceramic bezels being used there. So this is the first ceramic on a GMT. It was also the first two-tone ceramic of any type for a Rolex. This one also featured the maxi dial, so bigger hands, bigger hour markers, as well as the blue GMT hand. That again had never been seen before in any other sports watch or any watch of any type from Rolex for that matter. And one last bit is that in 2019, the 1 2 let me start that over. In 2019, the Rolex reference number 126710 BLNR was released with the Jubilee bracelet. So this is the dressier version that's often referred to as the Bat Girl. So a few years later, the Batgirl released, and then like we were talking about with the Coke being all brushed, it's all stainless and brushed. It has a little bit more of a brash look to it, a little bit more of a harsh look to it. Feels a lot more like a tool watch. So we were saying how like those polished center links, the blue as opposed to the red, it makes it a little bit more maybe feminine or just softer and not as kind of tool watchy. And then when you add in the Jubilee bracelet, which from some videos of the research I did, some people had kind of like some beef with that they removed for a period of time the oyster and then of course offered up the Jubilee, maybe because it made it look a little bit more feminine, but it was obviously the payback to the original one, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if they were offering Jubilees throughout the mid 2010s and early 2020, or I guess this was, like I said, 2019. So I don't
Mhm.
know if during that decade in the 2000s, if they were still offering GMT Masters with Jubilee bracelets or not. I failed to do that bit of research, but I did think, okay, interesting that this is a Jubilee going back all the way to the beginning. And then, like you said, I never given real reason to why the Batgirl had that name. But
Yeah.
like you were saying, feminine and masculine, it kind of got my wheels going. I'm like, all right, this
Mhm.
is kind of interesting, right? It is
Yeah.
a little bit of a more flashy approach. So whether you look at it as like softer or flashy,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, brushed is just always going to look more tooly. So,
Yeah.
but it's nice that they've got one of those for everybody because now you can get, of course, the Pepsi and Jubilee, and you can also
Or
get this in the oyster. So,
yeah. Definitely. And I mean, 2019, that's really when the Jubilee craze, I think, took off. Obviously, I think and it went through as everything styles. I mean, shoot, today girls are wearing bell bottoms again. That was
mm-hmm.
not the style 3 years ago. But so all styles change. But I just remember presidents as well, band strap or bracelets, but definitely Jubilees. That in the early 2000s really gave off an old man vibe to a lot of the
mm-hmm.
younger crowd. Your dad wore a Jubilee bracelet at Date Just, so you
Yeah.
wanted an oyster. And I think when Coke was popping those out in 04, 05, 06, I mean, that was what everybody wanted was the oyster. The sub really blew up during this time. And then, of course, then as the newer people come around, now their dad wears the oysters, and now so
Yeah.
they want the Jubilee. And I think 2019 really hit that perfect going into the new wave of everybody wants a dang Jubilee bracelet on anything they can pretty much get at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that really tells itself when we talk about my next watch, which of course is the 2023 GMT Master 2, the Guinness as
Wait,
well.
hold on.
Nickname it.
To interrupt you, Matt, I just want to not congrats, but I just want to say that was a great anecdote right there. Like, honestly, that was a great anecdote of
Thank you.
because I was thinking again about your 16610. I'm like, all right, that's a late 90s. So, or no, that's
Well,
a
early
2006.
2000s, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Mine's '06, yeah.
So, yeah, like 0506. So, yeah, I mean, that's great. It's like because the gold models, like you said, the gold and
Mhm.
the presidents, that's still a very popular configuration that Rolex have.
Yeah.
But the Jubilees being gold, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like
I
it.
mean, and it's true if you think about it. I mean, everybody in the '80s, let's go watch Godfather,
It
Wall Street,
is,
all
yeah.
of those are wearing Date Just, and that's why. So, us that grew up in the '90s, early 2000s, that's what we antiquated towards,
Yeah.
older men, so
And
we
that
wanted the
gold
opposite. Yeah.
and
That
that
gold
gold
with that
being
Jubilee, yeah.
on the little on the more, let's call it like a more like nimble bracelet, like right? Like
Yeah.
the Jubilees and the presidents, they're more nimble, they're
Mhm.
flashier, they're more articulate,
Yep.
right? Like Oyster is just I'm just here to just do my job.
Yep. It's a tool.
The
It's a yeah.
Jubilee is hey, dude, I'm wearing a
Well, and
$25,000 gold
also
watch, right?
is the same thing in
Yeah.
styles. In the '80s, '90s, my father when he was in sales, I mean, they wore suits to everywhere, and he was,
Mhm.
selling machinery in warehouses. They wore a suit. I don't care if it was 100 degrees outside.
Right.
Today, we were wearing polos and khaki, chinos, short or long pants, but
Yeah.
very very much laid back, and that was the style going away from when you're wearing a suit, you're wearing an oyster or a Jubilee bracelet, a president, bracelet on a watch because you're in a suit. But in the
Fits the
early
look.
2000s, the look has completely changed, and the oyster bracelet fits the look now.
Yep.
And so, I mean,
I
it's
love it.
everything with clothes and watches; they just follow suit with one another.
Eh,
But with all of that being said, as all things always come back around, we are now really in the craze of the Jubilee bracelet, and
Again.
I think it was really shown in 2023 when they came out with the GMT that was just offered in Jubilee.
Mhm.
The GMT Guinness is oyster steel and yellow gold with a black dial and Jubilee bracelet. This model features a black dial with two-color Cerachrome bezel insert, gray and black ceramic, in gray and black ceramic. In addition, the conventional hour, minute, and seconds hand, the GMT Master 2 features an arrow-tipped hand which circles the dial, of course, once every 24 hours, as well as a bi-directional rotatable 24-hour graduated bezel like every other GMT that's out there. But another cool thing that we've seen, me and Brett were actually again talking about this today. Well, it's the first time we actually talked about 2 weeks. So we always talk about things we talked about today. That's why. But the new bracelet is equipped with Rolex design oyster lock folding safety clasp, which prevents the accidental opening, and also features the Easy Link Comfort extension link, which gives you that half link extension on a lot of the new watches like my Yachtmaster, and I know Brett's Datejust and Air King both have this. So all of this is included in pretty much all of Rolex's new watches now, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest thing here, one, the sleek style, very city like. To me, I felt like this was the new Batman. This is the young man's Batman. The blue and black is the Michael Keaton Batman days. This is your Christian Bale of the Dark Knight. But of course, the
Yeah.
Guinness also matches it very well. But this is
I've
my
heard it
new
called the
baby.
Bruce Wayne. I've
Yeah,
I've heard that before. Or I think maybe one I've heard called the Bruce, and maybe the other one is Guinness. I don't know if
yeah,
it's interchangeable, but it definitely fits. Yeah, it
yeah.
definitely fits. It's elevated.
Yep, it's an elevated
Yeah.
look, it's sleek. I mean, the gold and black, I mean, it's the new man's, Pepsi, if you wanna lay it that way with, again, the black, upper bezel and then the gray lower, and then they option it in both 18 karat gold and a two-tone. So, I've worn both, gold watches, I guess, to me, because I don't really have any, I've only worn them from time to time, they just shock me with the
The
weight.
weight. Yeah.
So it kind of throws me off. So I guess I lean more towards the two-tone. And also, if I'm gonna have a solid gold watch, I want a solid gold president. I
Mm.
know a lot of course, family members and a lot of people I know have the solid gold Submariners, and they're beautiful watches. And I would take one in a heartbeat. But if I'm having to pick, if I'm going solid gold, I'm doing a full dress watch. So I really like the two tone here because I think it matches the GMT, and just like the Pepsis and the Batmans, you can dress them up or dress them down. And having a two tone GMT like this, that's just the epitome of dressing it up or dressing it down if you need to. You can wear it with a suit, or you can wear it, with just a polo and chino shorts going out to a nice dinner or sometime. So there's really no specific occasion you can wear this. But let me go ahead
Yeah.
and tell you guys the reference numbers. So the reference for the full yellow 18 karat gold is 126718 GRNR. And then the two tone is 126713 GRNR. So very similar reference numbers. Again, you can look these up on pretty much anywhere. If you just look at Rolex GMT 2023, they're blown up and they're talked about. But to me, and I think I've told Brett about this, I'll see if you agree, still a very underrated watch. I don't know why
Dude,
it
no one
didn't
talks about
click.
these.
I don't know why it didn't click last year. Maybe I feel
Did
like there was some hate at the beginning when it came out, and I don't really understand why, because I think the black and gray, even though if we can talk about it here, the is that really the daytime nighttime differential that a lot of us want to see, with
Mhm.
talking about, the red and black versus the black and gray. Obviously gray is a little bit lighter, so yeah, that's the daytime, but it's more for the style. So you can sit there and bash it for, hey, this is more of a style piece than a tool piece. But I think everybody realizes that when they see it in 18 karat gold, is not something your everyday pilot, your private licensed pilot is going to be flying around with.
I saw a video about a month ago talking about these watches and how they're easier to get than most of the fancy sports watches because they're so underappreciated or
Yeah.
undervalued or however you want to look at it. But and I know you and I have kind of talked like probably on but also off of the podcast about how the full gold and most of the gold Rolexes, they don't necessarily hold their value,
Yeah.
and I mean, just saw a post, a guy on Reddit, just walked in, had a Cookie Monster offered to him or something,
Mhm.
and a lot of people were
Especially
kind
the
of
gold
freaking out.
subs, and especially the gold subs, whether it's Cookie Monster or the
Yeah,
yellow gold ones.
yeah. So they don't hold their value. So I mean, maybe because of that, maybe people don't look at it like they're so investable the same way that they look at the Pepsi. Obviously, it doesn't have the like real tried and true history and heritage through Rolex, but yeah, for
Yeah.
whatever reason, like you said, it
I
didn't
think
really
it's
click.
I think it shows really the artificial inflation of Rolex watches when it comes to, I
Yeah,
mean, you're paying 40 grand for a
very much
yellow,
does.
gold, blue sub, or you're paying 40 grand for a day-date president. I have 2 of those sitting side by side. I can bring 2 of those in. This one will sell for, I paid 40 for both. This one will sell for 38. This one will sell for 55. I
Hmm.
paid the same thing for them. They're both yellow 18 karat gold watches. It's just for some reason the popularity
It's
of the
just the
yellow gold
demand.
subs just aren't there. And I think that's the same thing with these GMTs. It's going to fall more. It's a great watch, and if you have one, I think everybody would love it, but it's not just yearned after like a
No,
president is.
I've never. I mean, for as many people as we know across the watch community and all that good stuff, right? I've never seen, never heard of anyone owning one of these, being allocated one. I'm in a bunch of
Yeah.
Reddit, groups. Nobody
Yeah.
ever. I've seen root beers. I've seen Pepsis. I've seen this. I've seen that. Dog, never. I know it's only been out for a year, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I know it's not like 10 years or something like that. But again, I
I
mean,
mean,
just kind
do
of
you
interesting to
think
see.
it's
Like you would think would pop up every now and then.
do
You see
you
it on
think
those stupid like Rolex like Instagram pages that like
yeah.
where they just repost some video that they found elsewhere. But other than that, nowhere. And I've also never seen one in person in a store. Even exhibition models. I think you have, but you
Yeah,
were. I
I
think you
have.
saw it
I was out of the
a very
country. Only
touristy.
time I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You saw
I
it at a
was out
very
of the
touristy watch shop. So,
yeah. I
um,
was out of the country, and do you think it's so many people have a bad taste in their mouth about being on a wait list with Rolex. Do you think it's the reason why a lot of these new watches are really hated, quote unquote, you can say, hated on, is because they know I'm never fucking getting this watch. I'm gonna sit here and
oh,
not like sit here and talk it up and know to myself, you know, when it's a new Rolex coming out, we don't even go into our AD and even ask for one. I go in there and facetiously ask for one, be like, hey man, you
right,
got one of those new GMT? And they'll laugh and no, I've seen one all year.
right.
And so maybe that's why you love to hate something that you can't have, and maybe I think that could be a very big reason why a lot of these influencers in the watch community want to hate on this watch is because there's kind of that jealousy aspect. But if that guy that was talking shit about it on TikTok had one and on one, he'd be loving that bad boy up. And so I think there is a little bit of hatred in the heart of, hey, I can't even get my freaking black sub. I know I'm not about to get the celebration Rolex that came out last year, or the emoji Rolex that came out last year, or of course the Guinness that came out last year. All of
Yeah,
these watches, I think that definitely will have something to do with it. And as we know, talking bad about a certain thing, item, and fire festival, talking bad about anything gets way more clicks than talking
drums
good
it
about
up.
something does. I mean, everybody loves watching that YouTube video about I went to the worst, fire festival, Coachella in the world. But if you sit there and say my great time at Coachella,
Right.
you're gonna get double the views talking crap about something than you ever would saying something good about this.
I wonder if one of us is gonna be getting one of these.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to
I
know
bet you
how
if we
long you
push
got a wait list, dude. I
yeah.
mean, I bet you could get it in like 6 months.
I bet you
I
if we
mean,
pushed, we could. Seriously, there is not another GMT you could probably get within a year. Even if you're doing the just solid black dial or
yeah.
black bezel GMT with the green turquoise hand, which again is a very underrated another watch that's very underrated. If you want something that
Wait,
looks
which one
like
is that?
it's the I
I
don't know
I
the name of
always
it.
forget about that one.
Yeah, it looks like a sub, but it has the turquoise
Yeah,
looking
it.
GMT hand.
I'm looking that
That
up
that
right
watch I
now.
bet you would take a year to get. So
Well, I found the search we're looking for. It's the Lefty Sprite. That's the one you're talking about.
no, no. Let me
Or
find.
okay, so it's not current.
No,
Well, I guess
the
it's not
the
currently
Sprite
offered,
is
but
again, the Sprite is a good watch. I
got it.
believe it was. We're gonna
They
have
just
to
have just like an all black like uh
yeah,
24-hour bezel with a green hand because it
yeah.
sounds. I feel like
I've
I've seen
seen
what
this
you're talking
watch
about.
before.
Yeah,
Maybe it isn't offered anymore, but I know it was.
it's like as you were explaining it, I'm thinking I've seen this watch on Instagram or somewhere similar before.
Let me see here. Yeah, here it is. Rolex ceramic green hand 2019. Here, look up this reference number.
Wait, hold on.
GMT Master 2, reference number 116710LN. That is the watch that, is very understated. It's a GMT, but it really looks like a Submariner, other than the green writing on the GMT Master 2 and the green GMT hand.
Yeah.
That
I
is a
found they're
very
on
understated
Chrono.
watch. Yep. They
Okay.
might not be offered anymore. Dang. They might have ended after
Yeah.
2019. Maybe
No, I
COVID
mean,
took it out. But that is a very understated watch that not a lot of
yeah.
people know about.
I just went to the website. The only black, well, I shouldn't even say the only black. No, the only green thing, anything that they have is this. Is the Lefty Sprite.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I found a bunch of these on Chrono, and dude, they're trading for like retail for what one sells for today. I
Mm-hmm.
wonder what the caliber. I mean, it's probably not that far off. You're probably going to get a like a very um equivalent caliber performance, but it
Oh
might not
yeah.
have all the bells and whistles. You might not get like Easy Link and some of that
But I
type
mean,
of thing.
these things were still being sold in the late 2010s, so maybe you never know. I don't know when the Easy Link started with Rolex. We
Yeah.
probably should know that, but we do not. Um.
Well, I mean, I think the big takeaway is that like, I mean, they haven't really made any bad GMTs. I mean, I think I was a lot more excited. I was a lot happier that we landed on GMTs than I was Submariners. I think
Mhm.
there's a lot more variety for certain with the Submariner collection, but I think from like a overall aesthetics and like we talked a little bit about the supply and the demand, like the GMT Master, I think I think in some ways it exceeds that of the sub. It's a
Yeah.
little bit more like kind of stays the course, like I feel like they don't change up the GMT masters as often as
Yeah.
the subs do.
I
Um,
I
yeah.
feel like the sub, which I'm talking crap about the sub, and everybody knows I love them, but I feel like the sub is just the watch that everybody knows about. Obviously, it's their most popular watch out there. Everybody knows about it. If you think you want a Rolex, you think of a Submariner. But if you know what you're looking for with a Rolex, you would want a
Hmm.
GMT. And
Yeah.
even and again, I always said when this watch that I thought was still available but is not, with the black dial, if you want something that looks like a sub, then get this GMT. I mean, the green hand's awesome,
Yeah.
and from afar, nobody's really gonna tell the difference. But of course, now it's no longer offered, so that killed that pipe dream. But but I feel like if you really know what you're talking about with Rolexes, the GMTs are just, I mean, they're hard to beat,
Yeah. They really are.
especially. And we're talking about if you can get one for um, from an AD at
Oh,
their
from
pricing. I
retail
mean, yeah,
costs.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, that's the tough thing about these. I mean, it's in
They're
some
even
ways
harder
it's
than
kind
a
of the
sub in
epitome.
most ways to
Oh,
get, aren't they?
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that. I mean, this collection is like the epitome of the Rolex problem when it
Yeah.
comes to the aftermarket, the AD games. I feel like no other collection, no other lineup of watches does that bullshit more of a of a service than the GMTs do. Because, like we said earlier, you might be lucky if you get a Pepsi in 3 years, man. I mean,
That's
if you
that. I
waitlist
mean,
for one,
5, yeah.
yeah, and like we said, they retail for what, 11 grand. They sell for
Mhm.
20 in a bad
Yeah.
market. I mean, it's incredible what the markup on these things are. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, in a lot of ways, this is the single handedly like the collection that that provides the investment aspect of Rolex. It
Yeah.
provides the desire and the waiting
Yeah.
aspect from the
It
AD.
does.
So,
It's much harder to get, and you'll even notice, I mean, Submariners in bad markets go under market or
mhm,
go under retail. GMTs, I mean, hardly ever. I mean, it's got to be
at
an
least the
'08.
Pepsis.
It's got to be an '08 level event happen
Yeah.
before
Well,
Pepsis are going under retail.
and and I was just saying I found those all black ones on Chrono.
Hmm.
Um and I know we're right at 1 hour, so we'll wrap up here pretty quick. But yeah, I know I was saying, oh hey, they're trading close to retail. No, this was year of production 2008. This thing is beat to shit, and it's being
Hmm.
sold for 11.6.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to click into all of them, but I see some 12, some 15,000. So
Yeah. The
I mean, another
2019 I was
example.
looking at was
Yeah.
21.
Oh shit, it was 21.
21,000. Yeah.
Oh,
For
okay, yeah. So
2019.
these are beaten to hell, probably 15-year-old
Yeah.
GMTs that are still selling for 12. So yeah, hence all of that. It's the
There's
epitome of it.
no better investment, and if you're wanting to walk down that path of a Rolex, if somehow you can
Yeah.
get on your don't get on your knees, that sounded weird, but get on your knees and beg for a Rolex. You need a GMT or you
Yeah.
need a Daytona. Those are the two that, I mean, the investment is there.
Yeah.
You know, the Sky Dwellers are great, the Subs are great, the Air Kings are great, but they fluctuate in value so much because it depends on the market. And the same thing with the day dates. I mean,
Yeah.
one year they're worth 80,000, the next they're worth 40. Maybe that's down to what you paid for it, but if you're buying it at 80,000, you know, you're going to lose your butt in 5 years if the market's bad and
Yeah.
it's back down to 40. So again, it's always about investing and buy. You know, it's just like dang stocks with these Rolexes, and that's why a lot of my friends and that I know have great collections and value in their collection versus what they paid versus what they have now is just like the stock market. You're buying it when it's
Yeah.
down, and obviously you can't do that unless you're financially stable. And so we're not telling everybody, hey, go lose your house over a dang Rolex, but you know, that's the time to really scoop up these watches and get
Yeah.
some pieces that you really want, is during those times of maybe uncertainty.
Yeah. Hey, one day I'm gonna get the call for a Pepsi and I'm gonna flip it and I'm gonna make the money that's gonna afford me like all my Rolexes. I'm gonna cover my basis. Woo!
If
Investment
you're RAD,
strategies.
don't listen to this part. Don't listen to this part.
We have to put some censor over that.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Well, this episode was really fun. I
Yep.
mean, I think it was really fun. I really like doing it. So, yeah, for the listeners out there, let us know if you guys dig this. Hit us up on Instagram or something. Just send us a note. Just say, hey,
Mhm.
listen to the GMT episode. Really like the format. Or, hey, listen to it. Think you guys should have done this.
Yeah.
Because again, this is our first episode where we're kind of venturing off away from the traditional, where we just kind of talk about a brand and their history and their founding and all of
Mhm.
that. So, yeah, that is that. David, like I said, had fun. We
Yep.
will come back with another episode in April. We could throw some ideas out there very quickly. I mean, we've got the option for like Speedmaster references. That
Yep.
would be really cool. There's a bunch of those. Daytona references. There's a ton of
Daytona, I was
those,
thinking
but
about, yeah.
yeah, but obviously we just did Rolex. So, but I mean, yeah, there's all
And then,
kinds
of
of
course,
things
we're
like
gonna do
that.
a Watches and Wonders episode too. When is Watches and
Yep.
Wonder this year?
I think it's in about 1 month. So I think our
The end
second
of
April
April?
episode, we
Okay.
should have some updates or content. So yeah,
Okay.
maybe we'll do like a one episode, kind of a quick reaction or something like that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we've got some options, and we'll try to keep them coming your way. So in the meantime, everyone have a great rest of the day. Have a great week, and we'll catch up with you guys here in a few weeks. Peace.